Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Game Things. I'm your host for the week, Ming, and today we're gonna start our episode by covering Resident Evil 8, specifically the Shadows of Rose DLC. Recently, we got newly revealed gameplay footage for the upcoming expansion. New footage basically showcases some of the gameplay mechanics as well as some powers that Rose possesses. In this expansion, the gameplay is somewhat similar to the old Resident Evil titles, where you have to solve puzzles to traverse certain areas. Aside from solving puzzles, certain areas will be locked off and made inaccessible by some sort of bloody ooze. The ooze, however, can be cleansed and removed when Rose unlocks her first power. Aside from the first power, we also got gameplay for the second power, which is a stasis ability. And this stasis ability doesn't just affect one enemy, it's able to affect an area, similar to the good old flashbang from old Resident Evil games. Speaking of the enemies revealed look a lot like the pale-head zombies, just that they look like the color of ashes instead of the yellowish color that pale-head zombies have. The zombies, however, are rather interesting though. When they grab onto you, instead of giving you a good old bite in the neck, they instead suck out Rose's soul, similar to the scene of a Dementor attack in Harry Potter. As for how we can counter these new zombies, you can either use the stasis ability to stun them, or use the good old trusty pistol that is found in every game to stagger them or kill them. But since it's a Resident Evil game, you'll have to keep your ammo in mind if you're gonna kill all the zombies in your path. Alongside the gameplay footage, Capcom has also confirmed that the game will be available on Apple devices as well as Switch. The Apple version of the game will be available sometime this year, while the Switch version of Resident Evil 8 will be available on the 28th of October, and the DLC for Switch will only be released on the 2nd of December this year. So if you have no other consoles to play this game on, then this will be a great piece of news for you. Lastly, it has been revealed that the Resident Evil 4 remake will also be available for the PS4 as well, not just for next-gen consoles. So rejoice all you PS4 owners, and the devs have also promised to reveal more info next month on the upcoming Resident Evil showcase. So be sure to watch that showcase, or if you don't have the time for it, then make sure to subscribe to Game Things so we can keep you updated. Moving on from Resident Evil, let's talk about Modern Warfare 2. As well as some new changes that will be coming to Warzone. For Modern Warfare 2, there will be a large amount of changes that basically makes the multiplayer experience extremely different compared to before. First, there will be massive improvements to the audio, making audio way more useful and impactful compared to before. Then, the weapon handling as well as recoil patterns have been completely overhauled. It is no longer simple to spray down an enemy from a far distance away, because now if a weapon is a close range weapon, it will mainly only be usable at close range, making all the weapons focus more on what they are mainly good at. As a FPS game, movement is extremely important, and for Modern Warfare 2, the movement system has been completely overhauled as well. The movement has been changed to be more skill based because some movements now have certain disadvantages. For instance, you can still slide in the game, but you can no longer slide cancel effectively, forcing you to think twice before committing to sliding. Perks have also been changed as well. Not all perks will be available at the very beginning, and players will now have to instead earn these perks as they progress through the game. On top of that, to enjoy. The first game mode is Prisoner Rescue, which is a hostage rescue game mode, and the other game mode is Knockout, an objective-based game mode where you either kill all enemies or hold on to a package for a certain amount of time to win. Now that we are done with the major changes for Modern Warfare 2, let's talk about the changes for Warzone. Warzone will be adding a new underwater combat which changes things up completely, as the way underwater combat works is completely different from general combat. In underwater combat, you can only use your pistol, and aside from that, you will also have limited visibility the deeper down you go. There will also be boats and proximity mines as well that can be found in underwater combat. This effectively makes Warzone a completely different experience compared to before, which is definitely exciting. Aside from that, like most other massive updates out there, there's also a new map for players to play on. and the map in question is called Al Masra, and it will also feature new vehicles for players to drive. Lastly, there will also be some changes to the Gulag system as well as the final zone circle. The Gulag system will now have certain modifiers making each Gulag fight different. For example, a 2v2 Gulag mode, and that is definitely a brand new experience compared to the old Gulag system. As for the changes to the zones will now be split into 3 smaller zones before combining to form one single zone. This effectively forces teams to gather around specific points and duke it out earlier because they will be encountering teams a bit earlier due to the split zones. All in all, the new changes are a definite banger and will definitely be a ton of fun when it's available. That's it for all the major news that we have for this week. Let's move on to the Flash News segment, starting off with some games that recently got a confirmed release date. First, we have Piece Odyssey, which finally received an official release date. The game will be available on the 13th of January next year, so for fans of the One Piece series, you guys are gonna have to wait a bit longer, but the wait honestly isn't too bad if you ask me. But if you like pirates, then most of you would probably also like treasure hunters. So this next piece of news should be of interest for you guys. One of the best franchises on PlayStation, Uncharted, will be coming to PC, specifically Uncharted Legacy of Thieves. The game will be available on the 19th of October and it will be available on both Steam and Epic Games Store. So PC players, you guys can soon enjoy this amazing game as well, and I personally highly suggest giving it a shot if you have never tried the Uncharted series before. Next, let's talk about some games that you can enjoy now if you don't feel like waiting. The first game that we're going to talk about is Sims 4. Sims 4 is now officially a free-to-play game, but only the base game, not including the DLC. For players that have already purchased the game from 14 September to 17 October, you guys will get a Desert Lux kit as a gift. But speaking of The Sims, if you really like Sims-like games, then maybe you can consider playing Disney Dreamlight Valley, as the title is a mix of Sims and Animal Crossing combined into one, but with all your favorite Disney characters. Plus, the game, which is now in early access, already has 1 million players that sign up to play the game, which very clearly explains how great the game is. Speaking of games that you can play now, we're gonna talk about Overwatch. The reason why I say you should play Overwatch now is because Blizzard will be taking down all the Overwatch servers on the 2nd of October. So if you really enjoyed the game back then maybe it's time to revisit the game before it's gone for good. But if you want to get your fix of Overwatch after the servers go down, you can always play Overwatch 2, and right now, the Battle Pass features a brand new support hero, Kiriko, which makes it the perfect time to jump back into Overwatch 2. If any of the previously mentioned games aren't your cup of tea, then maybe you might find something that interests you in our featured release segment for the week. The first title we have for this week is Solstice. Solstice is a hack and slash action adventure game that features two sisters that are linked together. Vreya, the human sister, wields giant weapons to destroy your enemies, while Lute is a ghostly shade that has mystical abilities. Throughout the game, you will progressively unlock more weapons for Vreya, while Lute gradually gets more abilities like revealing invisible platforms, destroying certain objects, and she can even use her wide array of abilities to aid Vreya in combat. To put it simply, Lute is more or less similar to Atreus in God of War, but with more skills, I would say. While most of the combat and aesthetics are great, the only so-called disadvantage that the game has is the camera. The camera angles in this game is very similar to slasher games in the PS2, PS3 era, where certain areas are a fixed camera angle and certain areas have a free camera angle. This might cause a fair bit of annoyance and confusion for players that aren't used to it in the beginning, but once you can get past this small issue, then you can enjoy a really decent title that is basically the cheaper version of Devil May Cry, but just as fun. If you are interested in the game, you can get it right now on PS5, Xbox Series S and X, as well as PC on Steam. The next title we are going to talk about today is Gundam Evolution. Gundam Evolution is a FPS shooter game featuring the famous franchise Gundam. While Gundam Evolution might feel like just another generic FPS, that is far from the truth. First, you're playing as a cool ass mech, so that alone already makes the game cool as heck and worth looking at. Aside from that, the game also features a large amount of mechs with varying amount of loadouts. You want to be a sniper? Sure, You want to be a melee user that camps at respawn points? Sure. You want to be a more utility-based mech that still does great damage? Sure. The game has a ton of options for you to choose from, basically accommodating to any sort of playstyle. All in all, the game is a ton of fun, and the best part of all of this is that the game is free to download right now, so you can download the game and give it a shot. Moving on, we are going to talk about a more chill and relaxing game in the form of Slime Rancher 2. Slime Rancher 2 is the sequel to the extremely fun and relaxing title Slime Rancher. I personally am extremely excited about it. If you've never played Slime Rancher before, then let me explain how the game works. It's basically a game where you rear slimes and sell products that are generated by the slimes in your ranch. So basically like rearing a chicken and selling the egg. The difference here is that your ranch is the home to tons and tons of cute slimes. These slimes can even be combined to form new slimes. But just because you can combine the slimes together doesn't mean that you should combine too many of the slimes together. Because once too many slimes have been merged together, they can turn corrupted and will become extremely aggressive and try to kill you. They will even corrupt all other slimes that are in their path as well, so they can basically ruin your ranch if you mess up. So while the game is relaxing, it can be pretty tense at times, which makes the game very interesting. All in all, if you're looking for a fun and enjoyable game, you should definitely try out Slime Rancher 2, and the game will be available on PC, Xbox Series S and X, so be sure to get it on those platforms. The last and final title that we are featuring this week is Field Chronicle. Field Chronicle is a real-time tactical battler, meaning it's like Final Fantasy Tactics, but instead of you taking your turn and enemy taking their turn, everything happens at the same time, which makes this game way more complicated and interesting. While you command your units to move up and attack the enemies will also move about and react to whatever you do, effectively making it so that it's essential to plan your moves properly, or one wrong move and you could face an army of enemies. Of course, since the game progresses in real time, it is entirely possible to even avoid battling enemies, which is why planning is extremely crucial in this game. Aside from the interesting game mechanics that Field Chronicle features, there's also a rather interesting class system. The game in total features a cast of 20 characters, but you can only use 4 characters at a time. So you might be thinking, what do you do with the other characters? The other characters can be equipped to your main character to give them more abilities. So let's say you have a swordsman in your party and you have a healer on the bench. You can equip the healer onto the swordsman and basically give your swordsman healing abilities, which basically makes it possible to create a party that has a very interesting playstyle. Overall, the game is a ton of fun if you love the tactical RPG games, and if you really like Final Fantasy, then this game is just perfect for you, as the art style is really similar to Final Fantasy. And the game is available on PS5, PS4, Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One, Switch, as well as PC. That's all the featured games that we have for this week. Next, we're going to cover the free games section that we have for this week. Ark Survival Evolved as well as Gloomhaven this week, so be sure to claim it as soon as possible. On the PS Store, you can try out the demo for the game Warlong Fallen Dynasty. This game is rather interesting because our other host, Show, actually completed the demo and suffered a lot just to get to the boss. The game in general is a Souls-like game, but the main reason why this game is really difficult is because if you mess up one time and die to an enemy, that said enemy gains a morale boost which effectively makes them stronger and way more deadly compared to before. Which is mainly why my good old buddy Show struggled a lot to reach the boss. But of course, even with the difficulty level, it is undeniable that the game is a ton of fun and there are quite a lot of things to try out in the demo itself, so I highly suggest trying out the demo and get a good feel of the game. Anyway, that's all we have for this week. Thank you for tuning in. I was your host for the week, Ming, and we'll see you next week in another episode of Game Things.